All right, by this point, you've already decided to do classroom research. You've done some background reading on your topic and seen what's already been done and tried to understand your topic a little bit better and to hopefully narrow that topic down to something that's of reasonable size that you could accomplish in, let's say, a 6 month period. Um, and then you've taken a strategy, you found some sort of maybe instructional strategy or behavior modification strategy that you think will work, and you've tried to imagine whether it will work for your students. And if not, the ways in which your students are different. So you have to adjust the strategy in order to make it fit. Keep in mind that this whole process, after you implement your strategy, will require a lot of adjustments and you'll learn a lot about your students and the intervention during the process. But for now, you've just sort of thought about how your students and the demographics they represent differ from the research that's already been done and the demographics that have been involved in those studies. So now you get to the point where you have to start to plan on the practical implementation of the intervention that you have in mind. So I'm going to go back to that hypothetical example that I've been using for a few videos, and that's a social studies or social science teacher who's decided, and this isn't unusual, they've decided that um, they don't have the passion they once had. In fact, I realize now that I'm talking specifically about my co-coach. I was a JV soccer coach, and my co-coach was a social studies teacher, and he said it took him 5 years to get burned out. So you're this guy. I won't say his name, um, but you're this guy, and you want to kindle that passion. So you're connecting your interest in sports with what you're doing in the classroom, and you found out that you want to study how athletic involvement influences students. And after reading all about it, you realize you're specifically interested in their, let's say, teamwork. So you like team sports like volleyball and basketball and like hockey and football and soccer. And so you're focused on whether or not students learn about teamwork and that if that changes their understanding of the classroom. So you've done all of this like narrowing down of your topic, and then you found that, let's say you found a really neat study where students involved in team sports are happier. They rank they rate higher on their happiness inventories. So you wonder if you can't design some way of introducing teamwork into the classroom in order for students who are not in team sports to benefit from that same feature of team sports. So you're thinking, all right, how can I design a teamwork strategy? And so you read more about it and find like team building activities. I'm just like I'm following a hypothetical thread here. And so you read about like 10 different team building strategies and how students feel about them. So you're like reading reports of what students liked, what they didn't like, and all the while you're thinking, all right, well, these aren't my students. What are my students going to say? So you're thinking from their perspective, and eventually you come up with two team building strategies that you think will work for your students specifically. Now it's time to plan your intervention. So you've already got some items here. You have a hypothesis that team building activities will improve students' um, I guess, ability to work together as a team, so their teamwork skills, and that if you build teamwork skills, they will be happier. So you've got a happiness inventory, and you have this underlying theoretical foundation that teamwork is necessary. It's a necessary social skill that improves happiness. So let's plan your intervention. So what will you do? I've got a couple of alternative examples. So I have this team building exercise activity for a social studies middle school teacher. But maybe you want to try a new teaching strategy. That would probably be the most popular topic. You want students to learn math better or learn their how to differentiate nouns, adjectives, and adverbs or whatever. And so you want to find a new way to do this or a new way to accomplish that. Maybe there's an activity that you think will boost student interest and engagement and motivation. Maybe you think that students need to work together better, or they need to work separately better, or they need to develop emotional intelligence skills. Maybe you want to know what role you're playing and how you can change student retention based on how you present yourself or how you speak or how much time you spend doing this and that. Um, but think about what your problem is, what sort of change you want to see happen, and what you can do to make that happen. And so, um, if you are doing applied research, there will be something that changes, something that you're introducing. This is your um, experimental condition. What are you doing to affect the change you expect to see? So that's going to be your intervention. Um, if you're doing a randomized controlled experiment, then there will be a control group where you don't use the experimental condition, but don't worry about that right now. All you want to do is change your classroom, change some feature of your classroom. So what is it that you're going to change, and what is it that you expect to have happen as a result of that change? So the intervention is the thing that you're going to introduce to the classroom. Um, and ideally, coming into this step, you already know what that's going to be. So then the second part of that is, once you make that change, what do you expect to have happen? So in the social studies example, this eager soccer coach who was my friend, and I'm just making this example up, he he wants all of the students to benefit from teamwork, and he wants them all to be happy. So he's willing to set 30 minutes aside once a week to do a team building activity with all of his classes. And he thinks that he can boost student happiness, and then with happiness, there's like higher motivation, intrinsic motivation or internalized motivation, perhaps higher GPA as a result. I'm sure there's all sorts of associated benefits, but all he's interested in is improving happiness. Or maybe he could also test how well their teamwork skills have improved. I'm not sure what um, an inventory for teamwork might look like, but I bet you it exists. So in this example, I keep wanting to use this name. This hypothetical teacher is going to be implementing team building activities, and he's going to then test later in the year, whether teamwork skills have been developed and or happiness levels. And so he wants to see those two things go up. Now, this might be a one-time thing. You do one team building activity and then measure and see if teamwork has improved. But chances are a change like that is going to take time. So students might take a full hour just to familiarize themselves with the new activity. And so there'll be a period of like change and frustration and like uh, apathy and lethargy. So maybe you want to spend at least 2 hours with the new intervention. Or maybe it's a whole new teaching strategy and it's going to take 6 weeks of practice before you can expect to see a change. Most therapeutic interventions, so like psychotherapy or pharmacotherapy, like taking drugs, need at least 12 to 16 weeks before a reliable change can be seen. So interventions can be as short as 8 weeks, but shorter than 8 weeks is pretty rare. 16 weeks is more common. And then I think in some cases you might see 24 weeks or even like up to a year of regular intervention. So come up with a reasonable length of time for the intervention, as well as, is that the same thing? I wrote, what do you expect to happen twice? So you don't need to answer that twice. Just the one time I think will suffice. By the way, these questions are really simple to ask, simple to read off like this, but in the actual process, it's imperative that you ask and answer these questions. Otherwise, you won't know um, how thorough to be with your research project. And so it's like, oh, I'm just going to start lecturing more. Okay, well, how long are you going to do that? And when are you going to stop to see if it's working? Oh, I don't know. I'm just going to lecture more. I think it's going to be effective. Well, in order to know if it's effective, you need to come up with a length of time that would be reasonable to expect it to be effective. And then if you don't stop and see if it's effective, actually collect evidence to see if what you thought happened actually did happen, you're just making changes for no reason. There's no method behind it. There's no reason or rationale. So again, the whole idea behind conducting classroom research is to be systematic with the process so that you don't ignore something that's there or find something that's not there. In other words, you just, it's your imagination playing. You think you know what happen, what will happen or what should happen, and you ignore what actually happens. Don't make the mistake that I made and just assume that you're doing it right. You can be accountable. You can hold yourself accountable.